Hey everyone, I'm here with Peter Baines, and today is going to be a fantastic conversation because you're not hearing from a real estate agent. You're going to be hearing from someone that has got an incredible helicopter view of business. He's a renowned speaker. He's a philanthropist with his time, and we're going to find all about this guy that, mate, I've got to tell you, Peter, people rave about you. I've been looking forward to this interview. The name is Peter Baines. Can I just quickly get a snapshot? Just tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, good on you, Tom. Thank you, mate. So for 22 years, I was with New South Wales Police as a forensic investigator. Spent my day investigating scenes of major crime and homicides and so forth. And the turning point was after the Bali bombings. 202 people died, 88 Australians, and I was sent over as part of the forensic team to lead the identification of those who died. And following that, 2 years later, I was then sent to Thailand after the Boxing Day Tsunami, where I spent most of 2005 either working or preparing to go. And my role was again leading the Australian team and the international teams in the identification of the 5,395 bodies that we recovered after the tsunami. So that was basically my career, and I spent the final 2 years working for the United Nations Office of Drug and Crime in Southeast Asia, and also spent 12 months working for Interpol in Lyon in France on a counter-terrorism project.
Wow. How many people died Bali bombings?
202, 88 Australians. So it was really the first major exposure.
What year was that again?
2002.
Okay. So 2002, you're working in Sydney.
Correct.
And all of a sudden, they say, you're off to Bali, been this disaster, and your job was to lead identifying the Aussie bodies or all bodies?
All bodies, because at the time, we don't know who they are, the identity of the deceased.
I feel dumb all of a sudden asking it.
No, not at all. Yeah. And in Bali, the thing that complicated the disaster process, well, a lot of the bodies, because of the nature of the incident, suffered major trauma. So it was a much more difficult process than just a simple identification.
Just talking to you, all of a sudden, it's only been a minute, and all of a sudden, I've got perspective of when I compare the problem that a real estate agent might be watching this video saying, but Tom, you don't get it. My market's really hard. And just having a chat to you, and I'm thinking of the day-to-day stuff that's going on, like people are dead, there are family members that are hanging on, right? You're there trying to identify this is, David Smith. That is turbulent. That is chaos. That is like when I look at life and I look at two extremes, order, where you wake up and things are good and things happen without disruption. And I look at the opposite extreme where chaos, where there's one bit of bad news after the other, and you somehow have to keep going on while the thing's falling apart in front of your face. That's just brought perspective. Can I ask you, how do you stay emotionally okay and do your job when you're seeing that stuff?
It's a balance. You need to be connected to the job, but you need to also have a barrier and distance. And I often say the most difficult part of our job was dealing with families, but the most rewarding part of our job was dealing with families. I turned up at a temple in Thailand, a place called Wat Yan Yao, and there was 3,500 bodies on the ground in this temple in advanced state of decomposition. And I meet people who had lost their families. And I remember sitting on the steps of the temple at the end of one of the long days with one of Australia's leading pathologists who was part of our team. And he said to me, Pete, I think all we can do here is a token effort. There was 3,500 decomposing bodies. It remains the world's largest ever disaster victim identification attempt ever undertaken anywhere in the world. Thousands bigger than 9/11. 5,395 bodies, thousands bigger than 9/11. He said to me, all we can do here is a token effort. But you know what? By just bringing it back to what to do to start with and then doing something else and continuing to take action, we identified over 5,000 bodies and they were sent home. And their mothers, their daughters, their husbands, their wives, their sons of someone. And I think bringing that back down and when we got to meet families, and I've got some incredibly special memories of times that I spent with families who lost husbands and wives and mothers and fathers, and it was incredibly special. But of course, you've got to have that balance because you're dealing with death every day.
Yeah.
And you've got to find that balance.
So again, I've had another moment that sort of just got my body sensations feel totally different when I never thought it's more than 9/11. For some reason, 9/11 hits me as, oh, it's 9/11. But in terms of stats and data, you are right. There was more people that died, a human body, when you look at comparing apples for apples. Wow.
See, in the Boxing Day Tsunami, there was 250,000 people who would lose their lives. A vast majority of those were in Banda Aceh in Indonesia, and there was no identification attempt undertaken. But the major identification work was Thailand and a small part in Sri Lanka, where most of the deaths occurred. But it was, and looking at what the work we did there, it's hard to imagine that a process of that size would be undertaken again.
Just talking to you, and anyone watching this, there's a quick reminder, no matter how bad things are happening for you right now, there's a good chance if you're watching this video, you're already a winner on the birth lottery, right? If you think about it, like to me, I can't help it. I'm thinking to myself, and I know that a lot of the work that you did subsequently, and we're going to talk about it later on in the video, is helping a lot of the children that became orphans of the tsunami. And I think to myself, there is no reason why I should have had a better run in life than a 1-year-old kid without a parent in Thailand. That to me is, I won the birth lottery, you know? And I think sometimes we forget that. And I'm going to move on and ask you, what have you learnt about gratitude in the process?
I think that, there's opportunities that come to us, and the more we give, the more we receive.
Yeah.
And it's something that I have learnt, and it's been reinforced ever since my time in Thailand. And I came back from Thailand, an incredibly difficult place in my life. Personally, I was broken financially, physically, mentally. I was exhausted and I was broken. It was one of the most difficult times of my life when I came back. And it was at that point, with a conversation with a former colleague, that said to me, we should do something about these kids that we met in a tent. And as I say, I couldn't have been in a lower point in my life, but that was when I decided to do something for someone else. And I did it for no reason other than it seemed to make sense. It seemed to be the right thing. Now I look back, it's 15 years since that conversation occurred, and I couldn't be richer, healthier, and in a better place, because I did something for someone else with the intent of doing it for them. The more you do, the more you get back.
Okay. Guys and girls, that's gold. That is absolute gold. So in a time when you might be rock bottom in your own life, one of the things that Peter said is he forgot about himself for a moment and he went off to serve others. And along the way, that seemed to be the therapy for you.
Well, it wasn't just a therapy. It turned into personal success, professional success, business success, all of these things. And, I enjoy living a good life like everyone does. And all of the agents that are watching this, we all enjoy a high quality of living here in Australia. And it's something that we seek. But, supporting or working for others doesn't have to be at the expense of it.
What you're saying is you can make an impact and an income at the same time.
Absolutely.
Do you do that now?
I wrote a book on it, Tom.
Right.
It's called Doing Good by Doing Good.
Okay, doing good by doing good. Gonna have the link there. Is that, how many books you written? You written one?
2.
Two. What's the other one called?
Hands Across the Water, funny enough.
Okay, Hands Across the Water, Doing Good by Doing Good. Love that. Is it a hard book? Is it a long book to read?
No, it's not. It's what it talks about is building communities and achieving business success and business growth through doing something for someone else.
Okay, I'm pumped. This is going to be a nice long interview. Can I throw some real estate stuff at you?
Go for your life.
Right? Okay. First one, something around feedback. Advise on fronting up to a seller or a buyer and letting them know their expectations are unrealistic. So what I'm trying to do in some ways is take this skill set and these learnings you got from one area in life, and I'm trying to make them transferable and digestible to all these hungry real estate agents that are always looking for content to put more deals together. Can I ask you, how do you, like, whether it's a buyer or it's a seller, and what you're trying to do is let them know, hey, what you want and what you're going to get are two different things.
Can I give you an example of what resonates for me when you ask that question? And it goes back to the Bali bombings. It was the first exposure that the Australians had to something of that scale. Now, there's an expectation around how long it will take to return the bodies of loved ones. And in Bali, we had a lot of families, we had a lot of friends who stayed in Bali saying they won't leave until they can leave with their daughter, their husband, or their footy mate.
Yeah.
And if I said to you, Tom, what's a time frame that you give me to identify the people who have died? What's reasonable, do you think?
You're asking me that question?
Yeah.
Weeks?
Okay, so that's not an unrealistic expectation and certainly a common expectation. But here's the thing. We had this incredible pressure that came from families in Bali, families in Australia, the government, the media, senior police saying we want these bodies identified, and how long is it going to take? In Thailand, we were there for well over 12 months. In Bali, we were there for many months. And the process takes long time. And the reason is because of the forensic processes that we need to go through, and we need to get it right. Because
the consequences of getting it wrong is not good, is
well, I had to have a conversation, Tom, with a lady in Thailand, and she spent days walking through the temple looking for the body of her 7-year-old daughter. And at the end of the third day, she came across the body of a young girl on the ground, and she said to the Thai police who were there running it at the time, she said, "This is the body of my daughter." They said to her, "Are you sure?" And she said, "Without hesitation." And so they took her. Now, the thing was, there's only one conversation I've had on a professional level which is more difficult than sitting opposite a family and saying to them, "I'm really sorry, we've identified your daughter and she is dead." Now, this lady who took that daughter, it was the wrong person.
Right.
So I had to sit opposite the family then and say to them, "Your daughter has been identified, but mistakenly she's been taken by another family. They've now cremated her and they've spread her ashes on a beach somewhere. How do you come back from that?" So these were the difficulties that we faced. Let me go back to Bali to answer your question though. So the families that were there, the expectation that came from every stakeholder who had an interest, other than the forensic police who we knew how long this would take, the expectation that this would happen within weeks, within a very short period of time. So what we did to manage the expectations was we got the family members. We took them into the conference room of the Kartika Plaza Hotel in Bali, and we ran them through a disaster victim identification learning exercise. So what we gave them was we gave them information and we got understanding. So when we were able to say to them, this is a process we're going to go through, this is the time it will take, they then gave us their understanding that This wasn't something that was going to take weeks, it could take months. So they left that conference room, their hearts weren't healed, their bodies weren't returned, but they had understanding. So back to the question you ask, I think it's a tough conversation. And one of the challenges for the real estate agents is that they turn up to a prospective vendor and say, this is what we think your house is worth. And then if someone else comes in and says, we think it's worth more, and the vendor only wants to hear that.
Yeah.
But the challenge is having that conversation, giving the information, and in my experience, having tough conversations.
Yeah.
If you give information, you get understanding. It doesn't take away the pain, didn't take away the feelings that the families had, but we got their understanding. And I think whether we're having hard conversations with vendors or employees within the office or partners or whatever it is, if we give the information, we get understanding.
Okay. And any real estate agent that's watching this, let me just, condense that into real estate speak. What Peter's saying is, if you've got a vendor that's chasing 1.5, and the reality is they're only going to get 1.3, yes, it will still hurt that they're going to be $200,000 off. But if you show them the process of how a buyer arrives at the figure of 1.3, if you sit there and say, hey, listen, they're going to be looking at these 10 houses. Look at these 10 houses. These 10 houses actually are as good, if not better than yours, but they're actually 1.3. They're going to understand that. It's going to hurt. So what you're saying is probably the best thing to get someone's expectations managed is sooner rather than later, have that crucial conversation and show people a backstage view of what's really going on. So that way they can understand, yes, there'll still be pain, but the real secret here is to let people know what you're actually really, really doing and how you've come up to the advice that you're giving them or why you're doing what you're doing in your instance. I want to move on. And another question, someone else has devised these questions for me, so I'm reading them off my phone. The market is challenging. The importance of keeping your chin up, keeping up, etc. So, Peter, I don't know if you've followed real estate. I know you live in Sydney in the northern beaches, but we've had a challenging period. It actually makes it look like we've had not a great period after hearing what challenging really is. But for many real estate agents, they have been suffering. They've been suffering because the turnover rate has been lower. And a lot of real estate agents were making X dollars per year, and now they're making X minus 40%.
Yep.
So some of them may have halved their income. And it's been turbulent because when things aren't going good in real estate, vendors are also unhappy. And when vendors are unhappy, their agent is the one that they have a relationship with. So if a vendor is unhappy, sometimes they take out their frustrations on agents. And the nature of doing deals, it only takes one phone call to lose $40,000 in a commission. What advice can you give how to keep your chin up when things are falling apart around you?
Yeah, I think it's important to have a real clarity of purpose as an individual and as a business, and understand fundamentally what's the most important thing. And there's no question that when times are difficult and you've enjoyed the good times, when you've known the good times and now you're experiencing the hard times, that it becomes hard to be motivated. But I think that's where the true leadership comes in the principles of the businesses and so forth, is to look at what you're doing, to be able to look a bit forward and to bring in examples that exist around so that we can bring that perspective back in. And 40% less than what they might have been earning still might be a fantastic income compared to many others. But if we focus on what we've lost instead of what we've got and what we're doing moving forward, that can be the
gold. Because you're absolutely right. 40% lower is still 3 times what a young girl or guy makes working at Subway.
Yep.
Right? 40% lower is still probably much higher than the median salary in Australia. But if you're always focusing on what you had, versus what you've got, you're always going to feel like you're striving, but never seem to be arriving. Okay, and you made another point there about the leadership of being able to see beyond the turbulence.
Yeah.
Some people are better than others, aren't they? Like sometimes when the shit's going down, it's really hard not to participate in it and not be able to see far ahead. A bit like a turbulent flight, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I think it's we've got to take time, we've got to pause and look above what the immediate challenges are. And no different to that example that I shared when I sat on the step and just looked across this sea of decomposing bodies. And you go, what difference can we make here?
Yeah.
But each time we returned a body to a family, there was a significant difference made to that family.
You know what I like about you, Peter? Both questions I've asked you and both your answers have given me are examples of things that you have got control of. We're not saying that a problem doesn't exist or that it's not a great event. But what you're saying is, no matter what it is, it appears you can make a decision to make it better, not worse than what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Can I ask you this question? Do you work hard now?
Harder than I've ever worked, Tom.
Wow. What do you like? So you speak at a lot of conferences.
I do.
You're a major charity. What's the best word to describe your charity works?
Well, I founded the charity, but the work that we do, it builds strong communities, both in Australia, New Zealand, the markets we operate, and we deliver our operations within Thailand. And so I spend probably 80% of my week working for the charity as the Director of International Operations. We've got a fantastic team here in Australia, and a lot of my time is spent travelling backwards and forwards.
To where?
To Thailand,
Right.
Southeast Asia. And professionally, I make my career through the speaking and through the business consulting. And I feel like I work longer now than I ever have, but I enjoy it more now than I ever have.
Have you got a family set up? Are you in a relationship? Or
I'm married, yes.
Married? Okay, can I ask you, is there any words of advice you give to people that work long hours as well on the life balance, work-life balance?
Yeah, I think that, I hear that, a work-life balance, and just the framing of that almost infers that there's a difference between work and life.
Right.
And I think that if we're working just to enjoy our life, we're pretty mixed up. I'm fortunate that in everything I do, I feel incredibly blessed and lucky to have the opportunities I do. Remember, for 20 years I was with the police. If I ever got to fly to Melbourne for a work event, I thought it was a big deal. If I got on a plane, I thought, wow, I'm a rock star here. Now, like I've probably done 13, 15 trips to Thailand this year alone.
Wow.
And every 3 weeks I'll be on an international flight somewhere. Every week I'm flying somewhere. And the life I live, I'm incredibly blessed. And there's not times that I don't struggle with it, that I don't feel the sense of responsibility. But there's those opportunities where I can see the difference that we're making. And I get that personal reward from the output.
But I gather that what you're saying to me is that the work that you're doing, you like it so much, or you get so much meaning from it, that you're sort of saying it's not like you need this pressure relief to have lots of leisure in your life. You're sort of saying it's not segregated. You think they intertwine.
Oh no, yeah, you're right. There is that, but there is the need to stop. There is the need to put pause and find time for myself and do things outside of the charity work, of the speaking and the travel.
What's your favourite thing that you do outside of those things?
Snowboarding. Right. With my wife, and heading to Japan and hitting those pristine snowfields is something that, my head then is filled with the snow of the rather than all the noise of the work. And it's one of the things that is a great escape.
Did you go snowboarding this year?
Yes, we did. We went for a couple of days over to Queenstown and try to go at least once, sometimes twice a year.
So you've got a belief that there are bits in your job that you're not going to love, but when you look at the whole picture, you turn around and say, hey, this is a pretty good deal. I'm not going to freak out over the fact that I'm sitting on an aeroplane when at a younger age, I used to actually think that was like the treat, right? And I got to look, I can relate to what you're saying because, and it only took one person that changed. It's funny how if you can change a perspective on something, and I went through a stage where between the News Corp work and all the work I was doing and REA, I was doing, well, still do 200, 250 flights, mostly domestic, in New Zealand. And I got into the pattern where all these people say, oh, I hate the travel. And then someone said to me once, and it was at an airport, he said, Tom, there are always bits in the job you're not going to love. There is no job. The real issue is it only 20% or is it 90%? If there's 90%, maybe the job's not right? But if it's only 20%, if the issue is the transport to get from one place to another, and it felt a little bit weird because I thought to myself, now hang on a second, you're sitting in a lounge, you're doing things on your phone. A lot of the times you're doing social things. You're not necessarily even working. Chances are if you're on a flight for more than 2 hours, you might actually watch something entertaining. And I think you change your perspective,
And you know what? We've all got a choice. Like at any time, you can stop those 200 flights.
Correct.
And I hear within my industry, within the speaking industry, people go, I've had this many flights and talk about it as a burden.
Yeah.
I go, that's all bullshit.
Yeah.
Because you can say no to any job you want.
Correct.
We're absolutely blessed every time we're invited to speak on a stage.
Correct.
And there's people who would give their left arm to have the opportunities of travel and places we get to go. I've traveled the world speaking and been in Barcelona, I've been in North America, Canada, all these wonderful places. They fly you business class and it's never lost on me how incredibly lucky I am. And the moment it's lost on you, well, you need to get out.
Okay, so you don't have to be someone flying on a plane. It could be that you're driving your Maserati to your next appointment. Don't forget, there would be others dying to be in that spot right now. There's someone sitting in Commonwealth Bank at a teller right now, or there's someone serving coffee at a cafe that would say, hey, if my biggest problem was I had to get into the traffic and drive to an appointment to meet a buyer that necessarily was not going to buy a property that day, that ain't the biggest problem on the planet.
And if you don't like it, just step out.
Correct. You've got the choice to do it. Can I ask you, goals? You think it's overrated? Do they matter? Purpose? Why have them? What's your view?
I think the purpose is really important. And, one of the jobs that we did in Thailand was the bodies were stored, they were frozen, and they were stored in shipping containers. And it would be our role with the Thai soldiers at different times to go into those shipping containers.
Yeah.
And we had to move the bodies up to where we were going to do a post-mortem. And we'd go in and you never knew what was inside the body bag. But you'd lift the body bags off the shelf and you could quickly tell by the weight. And if it was a child, we had an unwritten law. And that was we wouldn't put the kids on trolleys and wheel them throughout the site. We'd carry them in our arms. We'd take them up to where we had to do the post-mortem. You lay them down. You open the body bag and you look at the innocence in the face of the kids. Move the hair out of their eyes and you go, I don't want to do this anymore. You do that a couple of times a day and you go, get me out of here. But you have to stay. And how do you stay? How do you work through that? Well, it's about having a real clear clarity of purpose as an individual and as a business. And for me, it's always about providing answers. when I was in the police, whether it was an answer to a family or to the judiciary or a coronial inquest, I was providing answers as to what happened. Now I see my life as no different. The questions are different, but I'm still just providing answers. And I think you talk about the tough economic times that exist within the market right now, and no more or no other time is it more important to have that clarity of purpose about what do you stand for. Is it about making the most money you can? And that's cool if that's what it is. Or is it about, supporting your family, providing work opportunities for the team that you support? What's it about? Because when your resolve is really tested as a business and as an individual, you have to understand that, because then you can make the informed decisions.
Okay. What I get out of that is, if you understand why you're doing it and you remind yourself of it at times where things aren't great, it makes them bearable, and it probably gives you enough force to keep going. In many ways, is to remember why you started in the first place.
Oh, absolutely, Tom. When we were away from our families in Thailand, working for months on end, our day was waking up and finishing, spending 12 hours dealing with death.
Yeah.
You got to understand what that's about.
Yeah.
And for me, when I had that interaction with the family, when this lady I'd never met before, she walked in, I held my hand out to shake hands with her. She walked in and hugged me and cried in my shoulder, and I spent 2 hours with her.
Yeah, yeah.
That day, I remember as like it was yesterday.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's why I was doing what I was doing. That's why I was away from my family.
Okay, so, and this is going to sound shallow, but for many of the guys and girls that are here that are copping a few punches throughout their daily week, people rejecting them, people pulling out of deals that took, weeks to put together. I think what you're sort of saying is, if you know who you are, what you stand for, why you're doing what you're doing, you're going to be able to remind yourself, there's actually a reason that I'm going through this, and it's going to help you understand that when you first started this, there was a driving force. And for many people, that driving force might be they want to educate their kids at private schools.
Yep.
For other people, that force might be they want to be able to travel exotic parts of the world, and travel's their thing.
Yep.
There's a group of guys and girls I know that their driving force is they want to have a Lamborghini.
Yep.
Or for a girl, I've got plenty of real estate gym members that are happy to work 78 hours a week, but to be able to wear designer clothes and logo. What we're saying is, if you can tap into what's that real reason why, it makes things easier.
And the market's going to turn, isn't it? Like, this is your industry.
Well, I have to say, it has turned. Even as we're shooting this video, those that are watching this are fortunate because they're still in real estate. There's been a hell of a lot of people in the last 24 months who aren't watching this now because they're not in real estate. They basically, some went into Uber, some have decided to go back into teaching, some have got a job in the building industry. Those that are in there are fortunate because what's happened, Peter, is they've got less competitors. Right? They've got less competitors. I want to touch on this. The Novacks, who I noticed were on the bike ride. So Lisa and Mark, actually nearly every client that I saw photos of are real estate gym members. It's just incredible. Like even names you're mentioning today, Mark, the Kentwells and, Adrian and, but let's talk about the Novacks because I work very closely with them, and I go to their office on a regular basis. And that's where I first saw you being interviewed. Even though, Mark, I've got to say, you didn't let Peter talk long enough, right? I want to, but Mark's a very intelligent guy, super intelligent. He uses the term that the bike ride that he did, which off the top of my head was 500 Ks.
Correct.
He said it was a human upgrade. That was the word he used. What does that mean to you? What's a human upgrade mean?
I think I asked Mark about that, and Mark and Lisa, beautiful people, very successful people, work very hard, provide a lot for the community of the northern beaches and the North Shore through the Novacks group, employ a big team of people and enjoy a lot of success. So you say, well, what was missing? What did this bike ride do? And here's the tip, Tom. If you didn't realise, Mark's not a bike rider.
Yeah.
You know, picture him in Lycra, will you?
Yeah, I know. Listen, I was shocked. Look, when I saw it the first time, I thought to myself, he's bought the gear. You won't ever see it again, right?
I think that the thing, and this is what I get to see, is the ride that we have in Thailand. It's not about a bike ride. It's about a shared experience.
Right.
It's about the experience you have through adversity, and it's something that, as we get older in the communities in which we live, adversity is that we didn't make so much money, or but we're not challenged physically and really pushed to our limits. And when you have that real challenge, physically, mentally, emotionally, and when you're challenged on that level, when you're moved, then you remember. Yeah. And then you have these experiences of this shared experience of going deep in relationships with people and deep in relationships with yourself. And Mark talks about, he wrote a lot on his own. And what that gave him was this time to reflect, the time to look in the environment that he was in, and this time of perspective when the 5 days comes to an end, and then you see those that you're supporting. So I think for Mark, it was just this something that a very successful business person had an experience with his wife, which, they travel a lot. They love cruises and so forth. And here we've got them riding through the streets of Thailand, staying in pretty modest accommodation, and yet they loved it so much.
It's funny you say that, because I've seen a change in him, but I also realise that in a world that pushes this notion of meditation, I can't help it, but when I look at the literature, Peter, whether it was Jesus, Buddha, Hindus, Muslims, philosophers, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, they all said that, and this has been for thousands of years, this is not a 2019, strategy. They've all said the ability to spend time in silence, to disconnect, to become a bit unreachable. There's something special about it. It's the ability to turn inward and go to the deepest level that you are as a human, and it appears for some people that bike ride was that. It was that.
And I think the thing that makes the bike ride that we do, it works so well, is it's achievable. It's not this super competitive, high testosterone event. It's an inclusive experience. Yeah. That means that you don't have to have trained for 9 months and be 65 kilos to enjoy the experience. And the real pleasure that I've got, I've led 29 of these rides since we started, and next year I'll be doing several of them again, and I tell you, I look forward to every one of them. Part of it is that time alone, where I get to ride, the time where you get to talk to people, you hear their journey. But one of the things, I took a group from New Zealand last year, and they're back next year, and it was a compulsory event for their company. So pretty ballsy thing by the CEO to take his company away, and there was a lot of big Kiwis there who didn't ride, had never ride, and physical exercise was not part of their life. Yeah. And I rode with some of these ladies, and and the things they said, one of the ladies said to me, she said, I've got grown-up kids, and they said to me for the first time ever that they were proud of me. I rode with another lady who said, I'm not that close with the kids, with all of the devices and technology that exists in our home. We live together, but I feel like we're separate. Yeah. But I did this bike ride, and the kids came and joined me. Yeah. And she said, now as a family, we've got something that we share. And
that's special.
Oh, absolutely.
That's special.
You talk about, well, I know we're talking about the Novacks, but one of the things, the greatest stories I love that came out of the Digital Live bike ride, which was for the real estate industry. Steve Carroll, who, along with Claire Baines, who came up with this idea and said, let's do this bike ride for the industry. And they launched it this year and rode. And Steve had his daughter, Annie, who came on the ride. And Steve doesn't share this story too often, but I said to him he should. It's a beautiful story. Annie had a relationship breakup with her boyfriend, and she came on the ride, and day 3 was a tough ride, a tough day. And physically they're spent at the end of the day. You're exhausted and you can be emotional. And they're sharing a room together, twin single beds, and go to jump into bed, and Annie's crying, and Steve says, would you like a cuddle? And Annie said, yeah. So Annie climbed into bed, Steve gave her a cuddle, and Annie fell asleep. Now, Annie's 19 or so forth, fell asleep in Steve's arms.
Yeah.
And he said, it's the first time that's happened since she was 7.
Look, Peter, I know, and I'm not going to name some names, there were other people on that ride that had transformation in their relationships with their kids.
Yeah.
I know that for a fact.
Yeah.
I also know that there was a commercial aspect to real estate there. For instance, Decrit, which is a company that I was involved in because News Corp had bought that company for a while, Dick and Fred.
Yeah.
And my relationship is more with Dick than with Fred. But, you know, and I know that pretty much after the event, every rider that was a real estate agent became a Decrit customer. I also know that after the event, the relationship and the ecosystem of the riders has stayed so strong that they communicate, and they've created their own network of information, of sharing information on best practice in real estate. They send referrals to one another. And in many ways, they've created a bit of their own little franchise network. Yeah. Not in the perspective of a brand name, but in the perspective of sharing of content, supporting each other. And it's actually built another real estate community. So I think one of the things that are underestimated is when people are put together, remind them, I'll tell you, I got stuck in a lift doing an auction 3 weeks ago. I got stuck in 4 weeks ago. Got stuck in a lift at Burwood. Lift. Rushing, it was a 12 o'clock auction, finished the auction, 10 past 12. My next auction's at 1 o'clock, and the lift, one of these newer buildings that they haven't done things properly, one of the lifts gets stuck. We're in the lift for an hour and 45. And it was a bit scary because it was a small lift, it was a hot day, there was no ventilation. And what happened is there was 9 of us in this lift, right? We had ambulance talking there. There was small kids. There was an older lady that was that had cancer, which I found out they had to relay it to the ambulance. But what happened is last Saturday, I'm doing an auction, and this lady that had been in the lift comes on over, and the agent says to me, Guy Lorello from Rain and Horn Burwood, do you remember this lady? She'd like to give you a hug. And I look, and it was like, oh, you suffered with me in that short hour and 45 minutes together. What happened is you did it together. I feel your pain, you feel my pain. Now, what you're saying is that one of the things that comes out of a ride is you can't get that where you network with someone over a coffee. You can't get that when you go to someone's Christmas party. There's something special when you're actually with someone and you drop your ego, you drop your facade, and you go to your basic level as a human. I'm scared, or I'm touched, or this is hard. It connects you with someone else.
You made the example of Dick and Frederick and Decrit and the market share that they enjoyed post the ride.
Which is nearly 100%, isn't it?
Absolutely. 100% of the riders that participated on the digital live ride this year are now clients of theirs. The interesting thing was the business didn't change. What Decrit was offering hasn't changed. It was just the relationships.
Yeah.
We want to do life. You know, whether it's spend time on holidays or spend time in our business relationship, we want to do life with people that we enjoy.
Yeah.
You know, I did a ride a few years ago with a property development group out of Victoria. On that ride was a bank manager from Bendigo Bank who came and rode on the ride with us. He wrote 20% of his annual lending budget on that ride.
Right.
And I spoke to him about it. I said, how hard was it? He said, it's the easiest business I've ever did. Because of the relationships that were formed. And this is what's happened. You spoke about that ecosystem that exists within the digital live bike riders.
Yeah.
And here's where I know that it works. The ride that they did in March this year was over 5 days. The end of day 2, Steve Carroll said to Claire from Hans Group, at the end of day 2, next year I want to do 2 rides.
Yeah.
None of them had been to the home. None of them had seen the kids they were supporting. Nothing had changed around Hans. All they'd done spent 2 days on the bike ride. But Steve saw what it was doing for that community.
Yeah.
In March next year, there's 92 professionals from the real estate industry who will be part of the digital live bike ride.
So these are the Aussies only?
No, there's Australia, there's New Zealand, there's people from the UK, and it's where the distribution of the market is. A vast majority of them are from Australia.
Okay, and by the way, to everyone watching this, please understand, at no stage, and Peter made it very clear, this ain't some spruik video trying to get riders or trying to pitch for money. This is something that is now officially on the calendar event. It is here to stay. It is there to meet various stakeholders' needs. Yes, one of those needs is it is going to help so much people that need, that suffer. But in addition to that, it's actually become an event that has got so many values attached to it. Community, ecosystem of real estate agents, contribution, health, fitness, meditation, time away. It's far more than that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the link of the 2 groups involved. The first one is Hands Across the Water, which is the role that is most of what your life is. Then you've got Digital Live, which in many ways is a subsidiary that supports that major charity, which is the real estate rides that happen. And you believe that this is something that's going to be set and forget for the next decade or forever.
You don't have people, leaders in your industry like Valerie Timms, like the Novacks, like Lee Woodward, Brad Robson and these type of people. You don't have them do the experience and go, we're coming back and we're bringing more of our community. Unless it's good for them personally and professionally. And I'd suggest to you the return rate that we get from the rides that we run is around 76%. 76% of our riders will come back and ride again and again and again. And Tom, it's not because of the work that we do in Thailand. Yes, they believe in us as a charity. Yes, they love our transparency and governance and the difference that we make. But they could support us financially if they wanted to. They come back and ride because of personally what they take from it.
Bum must hurt a lot after 500 Ks, right?
It hurts after 1 day, Tom.
But then it becomes normal.
Well, it's little bit of suffering, isn't it? But it's all that perspective. And, with the pain comes a reward.
Do you buy your bike and bring it on the plane?
No, we sort it all out. We give you bikes over. Everything's taken care of. All you got to do is turn up. We take care of everything. As I said, I've done 29 of these. We'll do 6 next year between January and April. And we've got it's a good process. We take care of everything. All you need to do is be there.
Okay, guys and girls, this is Peter Baines. This was an interview that carried experience, carried leadership, carried managing people's expectations, carried gratitude, carried a plethora of content. Mate, you're a great guy. You're making an impact while you're making an income, and I like the fact that you made a very valid point, and that is there's nothing wrong with making a buck, right? There's nothing wrong with it because it's money's not everything, but it is something.
Well, it helps us enjoy the lifestyle that we want, and there's no need to compromise that to do good in the world.
Correct. They don't have to one doesn't fail because one wins. You can actually have them concurrently.
And on a charity perspective, I need the supporters of us to do well out of that relationship, because a lot of people who go into the charity space and this is the work I do around consulting, is around thinking they confuse corporate social responsibility with philanthropy. Giving money to a charity is a discretionary spend.
Yeah.
And when business gets hard, the first thing you do as a business owner is you look at your cost centers.
Yeah.
And you'll cut down on your charity spend, your investment in leadership development and professional development, because you see them as discretionary spends. What we need to do in the charity sector is turn that investment into the sector into a profit center back to the business.
Yes.
Now, when I work with a business and develop their corporate social responsibility program, if it's not a profit center
Yes.
to the business, then it's not effective.
Yes.
Because we need, in the charity sector, we need
Sustainable.
people in, absolutely. And that only comes
Yeah.
when it's a profit center to the business. So the very thought of doing well out of investing with charities, not only is it okay, in my view, it's essential for all parties.
Okay. Very valid. So you've just shifted another switch in my mind is, hey, don't think this is all about you pulling out the checkbook or doing an EFT transfer and saying, yeah, I did my thing there. You know, this is about a long-term thing that has a high compliance rate. How's it going to have a high compliance rate? If it's win-win, right? And I like that. I like that. Peter Baines, thank you so much.
Good on you, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you, mate.